Hello, my name is Cayman Buller, and today we will be talking about what a VirtualBox is and why we should care about them. A VirtualBox is essentially a separate computer within your computer. And there's absolutely no new hardware that goes into it. All you need is the hardware that's already in your computer, and your computer will allocate space and will behave as if it's a different entity. In all reality, it's essentially a very fancy file. We care about virtual boxes because when we're experimenting with code and we're doing all of these things which could potentially destroy or break a computer if we're not careful, if we mess up a virtual box, we can simply turn off the virtual box, delete it, and start over again without any actual damage being done. Also, if we have multiple virtual boxes set up on one machine, we can cluster them and essentially make a cluster out of one machine. Now, it isn't very useful for actual application of clusters, but it does give us an idea of how clusters work, how to make them work together. It's a good idea to understand how virtual boxes work because they work almost identically to actual computers once you have them set up and running. So if we can effectively use virtual machines and cluster them, we can in fact use those same techniques on actual clusters, and it just gets rid of a whole lot of headache of accidentally breaking a cluster, which is a lot more work to get fixed up again. Now, when we start talking about how to make virtual boxes and virtual machines, downloading the software to actually make them is fairly easy. It's open source, most of them, and there will be detailed instructions on how to do that later. What we are going to talk about, though, is once you make them, we're going to be talking about how to set them up. Now, when we set up a virtual machine, it doesn't have an assigned OS automatically. So you're going to have to go in and choose one. For those of you who don't know, OS stands for operating system. Most of you probably use a Windows operating system if you use desktop computers. Those of you who know about iOS is what Apple uses for all of its products, so on and so forth. For this, we will be using Linux. It's not nearly as user-friendly, but it's an incredibly powerful OS that gives us a lot of control, which is what we want in this situation because we're going to be controlling a lot of what's going on, and we don't want a whole lot of unnecessary things going on. Now, before we start going on too extensively about which OS is the best and what we're going to use, which is in this case Linux, I think it's important that we take a moment to talk about what an operating system is. Operating system is pretty close to what it sounds like. It operates the computer. So everything down to how you interface with your computer graphically to how it manages applications and different programs it uses, all of that is in some way related to the OS and how it decides to run those files. Now, because there are different ways of executing different programs and scheduling and different graphical interfaces, there are lots of different interpretations of which OS is better, and different OSs have different strengths for different things. For example, if you are an artist, you are much more likely to be using an Apple OS and Apple devices because they are very useful for creating art and very artistic things. But if you are much more into coding and controlling how a computer works and understanding the internal functions of a computer, you're much more likely to go with a Windows option. In this case, we want so much control and so much control over our system that we could easily mess it up. But if we do it right, it's extremely powerful. And in this case, we're going to be using Linux. Now that we've talked a little bit about what virtual boxes are and why we're using Linux, we can start talking about what exactly we're going to be doing with our virtual boxes next time. Goodbye.